Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining. I am Inma Borrella. I am a research scientist at the MIT Center for Transportation and Logistics, and I'm part of the MITx MicroMasters in Supply Chain Management program. So I'm co-hosting this live event with Ms. Laura Alege. She's also a course lead at the MicroMasters. And today we are very fortunate to have with us Dr. Mani Janakiram. He's a senior principal AI engineer of manufacturing supply chain operations at Intel Corporation. Welcome, Mani.
Thank you, Inma. Good morning and good evening to all.
So let's kick off the event with a fun poll just to break the ice. I'm going to launch it now. So we just want to know why you are here today. So while you fill out the poll, Laura will explain the agenda for this session.
Awesome. Thank you, Inma, and welcome, Mani. We are super happy to have you today. So for about the next 15 minutes, Mani will provide some context on digital transformation. He will share examples about the digitization of Intel supply chain, and we'll discuss how to evolve from automated to autonomous supply chains. Inma and I will ask some questions we have prepared, but we will make sure that the last 15 minutes will be saved for your questions. So please use the webinar Q&A feature to ask those questions, and be sure you're logged in with a name. We will not answer any anonymous questions. We will also share some more polls during the event, so be prepared to participate on that. And I don't know how many answers do we have already, but maybe we can start by checking the poll results. So Inma, you share them. Thank you. So most of you want to learn about digitalization of supply chain. That's awesome. And I also see that you want to improve your supply chain using digitalization. So that's great. Hopefully, we will get to cover all these topics if time permits, and I'm sure you'll get a lot of great insights from Dr. Mani's experience. So with that in mind, Mani, are you ready to kick it off?
Yes, I am ready. I'll go and share my screen and we can get started. So. Okay, let me do this. So, Laura, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So as Inma and Laura indicated, I'll be talking about our journey in the automated supply chain to autonomous supply chain. It's a continuous journey. So if you are thinking that we are there already, no, we are not there. We are one of the travelers among many. And so I want to just get started with where Intel and what Intel and how it is supporting this kind of autonomous operations across the world. As all of you know, the entire world is becoming digital. And primarily, there are a lot of reasons why it is becoming digital, but we're also living in the era of COVID and working from home, like having different technologies, AR, VR, and availability of data. It's all forcing us to get faster into the digital world. And as you all noticed, semiconductors are primarily providing the underlying technology for many of this compute, connectivity, cloud computing, as well as the advent of artificial intelligence has actually exponentially increased how data can be leveraged. And another thing that's happening also is the digital data has been skyrocketing. And we expect that the connected devices would be in the 58 plus billion devices by 2025, connecting every person on Earth. And we are looking at Intel to power this growth. Another question that might come up is why this digital transformation is happening now, or why it is having this exponential growth. Again, repeating what I said earlier, the fusion of data with IoT and numerous other data collection, we can easily capture and collect unstructured data, not just its structured and big data, and also the memory being really, really affordable thanks to Moore's law, and with like in-process memory capabilities, and also availability of compute power. as well as very good sound reasoning with the AI and machine learning algorithms. When you put them together, that is where we expect the magic is happening. And so I mentioned AI, and artificial intelligence is actually enabling quite a lot of this transformation. For some of you, artificial intelligence might bring an image of like a movie like a Transformer, or a movie like going back, like it could be more like like a few other science fiction movies. But reality is AI is all around us. We are using it, we are leveraging it, and we are probably developing it as well. And the whole idea is there is a ton load of information out there, and like how we sense it, and how do we like harness the information to reason out of it. And then once we reason what we see and sense, then we take action. And that's where like we have interaction with the systems and ecosystem around us. And also the ability of the AI doing all these things, imagine, as well as learning and then integrating it into its next action. That is where the AI is actually enabling us. And we hear a lot in the medical industry, in the technology industry, how AI, the cobots, are really helping us. And this is where like it is not necessarily just a technology for the sake of technology, but it is enabling, improving velocity, agility, which is critical for supply chain, increasing productivity, increasing resilience, reducing complexity and cost. Those are some of the things that we actually are benefiting out of AI. And as I mentioned, how Intel, like is delivering this particular capability or value through the semiconductor solutions. As you probably know, we are one of the largest integrated device manufacturers in the world. There are very few left. And then when you start looking at Intel is like a huge internal factory network with a global internal factory network at scale manufacturing. We are also expanding and leveraging the foundries out there to expand the use of third-party foundry capacity, because Intel, like is not necessarily manufacturing every chip, but will be willing to provide an integrated solution through external foundries. And given to the current challenges, also with our aspiration to be a like a one-stop shop for everything, we're also opening up Intel Foundry. And so we're building, we used to have presence in the foundry, but our CEO, Pat Gelsinger, is really looking to expand what we call as the IDM 2.0 to expand our solution end to end. And for that, supply chain is going to be very critical, because supply chain, Intel supply chain is not necessarily looking internally to support internal factories, but we're going to be looking at how do we support a foundry? How do we support external manufacturing activity? So the complexity and the scale has gone up. And I just want to give a quick feel for how big and how complex our supply chain is. When you look at it from a SKU perspective, it is not necessarily at any order compared to the Walmarts and the Amazons. But when you start looking at the complexity, the lead time, for example, the construction of a Intel fab would take anywhere upwards of like a 2 years plus, with the $4 to $6 billion investment. And the equipment that we buy, our capex will be in the order of $10 to $15 billion, and our spends would be in the order of $25, $30 billion. And when you start to look at like one equipment, for example, lithography tool would be like hundreds of millions of dollars. So imagine the data that we need to harness to keep this equipment productive, keep our factory running, not to mention, like ensuring continuous supply to our suppliers, our customers, as well as working with our 10,000 plus suppliers. So this is the scale at which we operate. We have worldwide presence. We have what's called as the wafer fab, where we fabricate and put the transistors, and then assemblies where we actually package them and test them and get them to the warehouses. And so this is a big operation, all the way from foundries to customer. So it's a long process, it's complicated, and but we are enjoying it, and we're taking it as a challenge. And when we start to look at what are the different things we can do within that challenging environment, supply chain, particularly given the the situation that we ran into, risk mitigation, resilience matters. mitigating complexity matters, enabling faster lead time matters, and then ensuring that our supply chain is cost effective and agile matters as well. So in that a particular aspect of how we want to make our supply chain smart and intelligent, the digitization and the AI, like are playing a key role. We have several data scientists, the subject matter experts, and several of the engineers and technicians working together to really address various aspects of supply chain. We look at supply chain as a hybrid function. It is not just the sourcing function, procurement function, manufacturing, or logistics, or planning. It is a combination of all. So because it's yin yang, right? If I pull one, something else get pushed. And so how do we ensure that what we do has a global optimization versus a local optimization, and having a better understanding of what supply chain data is telling us, having a better visibility that we can actually act on, and having an ability to predict what is going to happen, and ability to take advantage of what we have, what limitations we have, and plan accordingly, like prescribe, like almost like an optimization. And on top of it, learn from what we do is what the whole effort is. What I've listed here is a laundry list of things that we have implemented, working on, and primarily I have kind of boxed some of those capabilities because these are, like where, like areas where we recently developed some AI capabilities like supply chain end-to-end predictive visibility and leveraging IoT in combination with big data for actionable analytics. And we have AI and ML models to provide what's going to happen, what's the best thing to do. And then in the contract analytics, which is hugely unstructured data, a lot of text, we have to develop NLP models. We have to actually streamline our process with RPA and machine learning with clustering and looking at where and how the contract, the terms are, working for us. How do we audit them so that we don't have to, like swift through thousands and thousands of contracts, but we need actionable insight into what is happening in the contracts. And then inventory is a big deal for us. So we have to manage and make sure that we have the necessary inventory of our products and spares and components at any given time. And so we also develop self-serve inventory models because one inventory model is not going to cut it. Maybe we have a multi-echelon inventory optimization. We have primarily a die attach based inventory. So we have different types of inventory model that gets kicked in. And so we are optimizing spares, demand supply using data science as well. And then, of course, another critical aspect for us is managing our ecosystem, or understanding what is going on with our supplier so that we can proactively manage risk and keep our supply chain resilient. And so we leverage the cognitive, web scraping and leveraging all the data to really understand what is going on. Is there an issue with the supplier financial? Is there an issue with our, like with the COVID and everything? Is the safety issues? If something is happening at one remote part of the world, what is the impact to our customers? What is the impact to our supply chain? Impact to our employees? And also to the society, so that Intel as a corporate citizen can step up and help. So these are some of the things that we are, like looking at. And you might be wondering, so where exactly are we heading with all these things? Our goal, is to really go from like a manual to automated to autonomous supply chain. If you're wondering, what do you mean by that? I just had some cartoons to just show that, hey, you know what I mean by manual, automated, autonomous is, for example, going from a broom to a vacuum cleaner to a Roomba kind of an autonomous cleaning. Or, most of your technology familiar that I share this slide a lot. The way our navigation system has evolved from a paper map to, to go from a place to a point A to point B to a Siri and navigation system that you just speak to it, it primarily putting like indicating where you want to go, and it directs you through traffic and takes you where you want to go. And of course, there are some stumbling blocks, but like that's a growing challenge that we have. And what we are facing, what we are looking is the autonomous vehicles. And in the future, I think it is there already in a limited way. Primarily, the vehicle knows you. It knows it is in sync with your schedule. It connects and primarily it takes you to where you want to go without even blinking an eye. And you probably, like in the future, will be sitting in the, like in the passenger seat. Today you could, but I think there is little more infrastructure and things like that that need to happen. So now think of the same technology that we can apply for supply chain. Currently, like we have planners, we have logistics experts, we have sourcing experts. So we tend to operate in silos. And so as I was indicating earlier, going from a silo kind of thinking to connected, intelligent, what I call as the hybrid supply chain is where we should be looking at. And of course, there are like challenges that like all of us have. Do we have the foundation ready? Do we have the data infrastructure? Do we have the right kind of a governance in place? And what are the metrics that we want to manage? How do we like make sure that culturally we are ready for this? Like from a people and from a business process and systems perspective, as well as what is the strategy to go from wherever we are to where we want to go, and how do we go about it? It's not like close your eyes and you're there kind of a deal. And foundationally as well as operationally what we want to do, and then leveraging like it's not the technology for the sake of technology. Where and how we apply the advanced analytics and AI is also critical. So those are the kind of things we're looking for, but we expect value out of this is going to be pretty big, and increasing customer like obsession from our perspective to deliver the best value, and driving execution, deliver to our commitments. Those are all the critical things we're looking for. So with that, I'm going to pause, and this is my last slide. So primarily, like as our past Andy Grove, our CEO, used to say, like we are going through crisis, but don't let the crisis drive you. You take charge of the crisis and survive it, and then improve upon it, is how we're looking at it. So I'm going to stop here, and I'm going to stop sharing, and then we'll go back to Inma and Laura.
Thank you, Manny. I love that motto from your CEO. Super inspiring. So thanks for a great introduction to supply chain digital transformation, supply chain digitalization, and for sharing interesting initiatives that Intel is implementing to actually achieve like this smarter, more efficient supply chain by using digital tools. So now we want to dive into some questions, because this is a great appetizer, but we really want to keep talking about this topic. And we know you're an expert. You've been at Intel for more than 20 years, mainly working on leading the digital transformation of the manufacturing and supply chain areas. So we would love to see, to listen to what you can tell us that how digital supply chain landscape has evolved during all these years, and where do you see it going?
Absolutely. I think that, like if you look at the evolution of digital supply chain, even 30, 40 years ago, we had, for example, a robot. A pick and a place robot was supposed to be a big deal at that time. Fixed locations, X, Y, and Z, and then programming it using, I remember doing that with some of the robots, just primarily being very happy building one which was able to pick and place. But today the robots are, like, in fact, I was seeing the Boston Dynamics. It can actually dance to the tune. It can jump, it can move, it can think. So the technology has evolved significantly. And it is not just for fun, right? I mean, it is also, we also hear about primarily having AI engine in transactions in stock market, having an advisor kind of a deal, and then AI admins. So what it is, as I indicated, it is evolving within the semiconductor, within the supply chain. We see that our warehouses have, I think, Inma and Laura, you can probably go into a lot of details there, but our, like using robots, location analytics, and things like that have improved significantly. So I think where it's going is really going from helping an assist to like taking and helping out the mundane task. Like I'm talking about even the software. Like for example, and look at RPAs, robotic process automation, robotic desktop automation. What used to be an Excel macro many years ago has evolved into a huge industry and software within RPA. And where I see RPA is going is primarily, if you kind of look at it from a Lean Six Sigma perspective, we talk about, hey, you have to look at a business process. You have to simplify it first so that you don't go automate something that is stupid. And then once you simplify, then you have to really look at, is there an opportunity for me to standardize things? Because that way it is easier for machines to learn, for people to, adapt and things like that, right? So my goal is simplify, automate, and then automate. And in somewhere in between, you have to make it intelligent. So simplify, standardize, automate, make it intelligent, and automate. And this is where the digitization is going. If you look at RPA fits in there. If you look at digital transformation and AI, it fits in there. And then where it's going is also more like a digital twin, which probably is an ultimate transformation of where, like our business processes, it's industry, like with an asset twin or a process twin. So some of those things are happening in that fashion.
You made a very relevant point, Manny, that I would just like to highlight about this idea of do not just go and digitize your process, just think about the process, things you can simplify it, make it better, and then you go and standardize and digitize it. Don't just digitize whatever you have now, because that's not the way to go. So that's a very important previous step to digitalization that not many people think about when they start the digital transformation journey. And yeah, thank you very much for your answer, Laura. I think you have
so
something for the audience.
Let's go now for launching the second poll, Inma. And the idea now is to bring you some information about Intel. So we are doing an Intel trivia, which is one of fun facts. And we want to learn what you know about Intel. So you will have something there on selling watches, owning a museum, or some Guinness record out there. And while we gather some of your responses, I would like to go back to Manny. So we have seen all the disruptions of this past year, and I would say a little bit more than that. And those have been pushing forward innovation. And I think this is related with what you mentioned on trying to survive and also trying to improve, as your CEO mentioned. And I was wondering if you could tell us how Intel was affected by the disruptions of the 2020 and how having a digital supply chain may have helped you on that period.
Absolutely. The disruption that we lived through or living through is something that I don't think anybody expected the scale or the impact. But we had, to your question, our supply chain, we have primarily business continuity planning in place. In fact, we have a risk and resilient team that, we kind of do some of this, not necessarily like COVID-like kind of an exercise. We do natural disaster. What happens, like, for example, some of the currency issues, or, we're also going through some of the cybersecurity issues and things like that, right? So we have business practices in place, and the business practices were actually helped with the digital activity in the sense that we could actually leverage modeling, and we could leverage some of the like a business process models and data and projection and prediction to say that, like a decision tree, for example, right? In simple terms, that we could leverage to see what happens if we do this, and what would be the end result look like, the scenario planning, and how do we, what would be the best answer for this one? So does this mean, do we have to plan our inventory differently? Does it mean we have to respond differently? And do we have to look at, like alternate sourcing for that? Do we have to really look at, with the warehouse and the cost of transportation going, these longer lead, like contracts need to be in place versus, a fixed versus variable. So those are all the things from a supply chain perspective, we look at it. And also when we had this COVID situation, we were really looking at what are the different products, how do we respond to customer, how do we make sure that our suppliers, not just from a product delivery perspective, but also from overall health, they're good. We also got into providing them with like with masks and ventilators, and ensuring the health of our employees as well as our suppliers was taken care of from that point of view.
Awesome, thank you, Manny. And it's amazing to see, okay, we had the disruption caused by COVID, but how are we prepared, and culturally also, to have this risk and resilient team and to be ready to address any kind of disruption? So it has been a great push of growth, and now I think we're ready to do much more in the future. So thank you for your insights on that.
Okay, so let's take a look at the poll. Most people, I don't know, Manny, if you know the answers, the right answer to the poll. Some, yeah, Intel insights, but most people answer that Intel's first processor powered a calculator. 51% of people believe this is the one that is true, and that's true. So you're all right. But actually, this was a trick question, and all the options were right. So Intel also used to sell watches. Intel has its own museum in California. It wasn't the company's original name, even though we all know Intel as Intel forever. And also in 2018, Intel set a new Guinness World Record title for most drones flown simultaneously. I need to find a YouTube video for that because it must be amazing. So now you know a little bit more about Intel Corporation. Let's continue with our discussion. Manny, did you know all these facts? Fun facts?
You know, like I had to look up the last part. I knew that, but I had to look up. I'm being honest here, but everything else, yeah. And I think if you are in Santa Clara, I would strongly suggest that you go to visit our Robert Nice building. The museum is exceptional. So
awesome. We'll do next time we travel to California. So digitalization is a very fussy term, and digital transformation, the digital transformation discussion is full of technology buzzwords. So we hear IoT, blockchain, digital twins, cobots, and many people don't really know how this applies to supply chain management. So I really think that at the end of the day, digital transformation is about improving supply chain processes by using digital tools, but the focus should always be on the supply chain processes and not just on the technology itself. So some of our audience, members of our audience are currently taking SC1X, in which we cover the basic pillars of any supply chain, that's forecasting, inventory management, and transportation. So could you tell us how digitalization has improved specific supply chain functions, such as forecasting, inventory, or transportation at Intel?
absolutely. Let's take forecasting. You know, we all know that the famous statistician George Box said, all models are wrong, but some are useful. And that what it means is you can have the best forecasting model out there, but if a situation arises, it's going to, you know, the demand volatility, the supply volatility might put you in, what did I forecast really? And as you also know, as if you're forecasting within the first quarter, you know, like within a year, your demand, you know, like a forecast error, it would be smaller. But as you project further out, it is like an outward funnel. So what it means is you have to really leverage the power of people, data analytics to really to come up with what the data is telling us around us, and then how often do I need to go make adjustment to it, and then try out different scenarios. Some of the techniques, you know, like a proven time series models, we of course leverage. Sometimes it is not just the one algorithm or one you know, analytic model that we're going to go with. We look at an ensemble. We need to learn from what has happened in the past. And we also know that some of the changes that happen, either it's a, you know, like a trending or a drifting, we know we can capture it. But if it is a huge step function, what Clayton Christensen calls as a disruptive change, that is sometimes hard to capture. But if you were to look at it, you know, like in a cycle, you know, like cyclical fashions in semiconductor, for example, in the past, we know the, you know, the CAGR or the compound annual growth rate is around, you know, 68%. And then every, you know, like every 6 years, there's a huge, you know, like a shift on a swing, because that is the lead time for building factories and putting capacities. So you could actually start to think about how it is going to change, not to mention how the technology is changing, what the adoption rate is. And of course, last year, as you noticed, there was a lot of semiconductor shortage. It is not necessarily because of the growth. It is also because of some of the supply shortages that culminated, and also some, you know, like a mad rush for some of the products, thinking that it may not be available, you know, like I want it now. That there was an explanation for it, because you're working from home, you need more compute power, more PC, you want more bandwidth. things like that, that has changed what people are looking for. So from our perspective, we leverage forecasting models. We leverage different scenario models. We have inventory optimization model. On top of it, if you're like having a new product, we have a digital twin kind of starts with a simulation, if you will, right? Modeling of what's going to happen, how it's going to happen. It could be a simple, like a Monte Carlo model. It can go into a more sophisticated discrete event simulation model to really understand how my network looks like. What are the different echelons in my network that is going to be constraints? How do I manage my inventory buckets across the board? What are the metrics that I need to really understand? And then once you have that kind of a model from a optimization perspective, you can align capacity and demand through like a big optimization engine that we leverage. And so it could be a linear programming, and we also couple that with machine learning to explain what the optimization engine is telling us, so that we could do not only predictive scenarios, we can also explain the decisions we're making. And we are also leveraging within our models, within our business processes, RPAs to automate, to understand data, to synthesize, and ensure that it is, it is right, it is governed right, it has got the right metadata. So it's a combination of all those things in that we are leveraging, and we are looking at the metrics like safety stock, and we're looking at service level, like what's the service level we're improving, and satisfaction rates. We're looking at inventory points, and of course, we're also modeling cost and from a strategic point of view.
I think it's really interesting the way you just bring it down to earth with the specific examples. I think that's much needed when we talk about digitalization. And all this idea of using these new technologies to really augment the capabilities that we have. So really like having better optimization models in which you can get better insights into machine learning, or just using RPAs to optimize the management of data. It's really like a very interesting way of just expanding the amount of things and the insights that you can get from the data. So thank you, Manny.
Thank you, Manny. So in your presentation and moving forward to the next question, you talk about the transition from automated to autonomous supply chain. That is what's bringing everyone today here with us. And this transition, of course, will have important strategical and operational implications for Intel. So we would like to ask you, why is this a key strategic pillar for Intel? And how is the company working on it? But we would like to know about the change management perspective. We're thinking on how to ensure the adoption, how to reduce the anxiety of your team, how to reskill the workforce.
Absolutely. I think like just because we are automating or like going for the autonomous goal, it does not necessarily mean that it is going to impact people. There will be some impact in terms of skills and ability to move up in the like in the learning and things like that. And that is where, like as I indicated earlier, the transformation, technically we have the pieces together that we can make it happen. Culturally, like I'm broadly speaking, culturally and strategically, we have ways to go to the extent of this is my data, this is my process, this is how I do it. Or the moniker that I'm a planner and I'm attached to planning versus, okay, you do the best planning, and if you're not able to deliver the product, what good is there, right? So thinking holistically versus, like in silo, that is a cultural shift as well. Having the right leadership to support, because this is not going to happen overnight. This is this is an effort that is a long-term effort that need to be supported, and luckily we have that kind of a support within Intel. As you might have noticed, that we have been, like the top 10 supply chain leaders as recognized by Gartner over the 10+ years. And those are the, like the reason why they're looking at is number one is the supply chain customer enabling and supporting. Is it ability to adopt technology and be agile and leverage the technology for the sake of solving problems and enhancing the supply chain. So those are the kind of things we're looking at it. And this also is from a sustainability and a good corporate citizenship perspective, right? For example, we have systems and tools that monitor and understand our water usage, and we have 90+% recycling, and our goal is to be 100%. And then we also have alternate energy. In fact, we have the solar farms, most of our parking lots, to leverage and to harness energy from that. It is just name a few, and then we all of you are very familiar with the conflict-free mineral initiative, and so zero waste is not necessarily something like that has happened, but it's happening as we go. And so those are all the things that we can, with the power of data, with the power of analytics, we are understanding what is going on. We plan for what can happen, and then look at visually understand and predictively manage those things.
Thank you, Manny. I think it's super interesting to speak about the company culture and the cultural change that it's required, and the fact that the top management should be super committed to it, so that the full company is into that. So that's a great addition above everything that we usually teach that is a little bit more technical sometimes. So it's great to learn about that part of the strategy. And I also think you have answered some of our learners and in audience questions, because they are super interested in the application of sustainability. So thank you for bringing those examples.
Great. Yeah, no, Intel is doing a lot in the sustainability space, also upstream with their suppliers and all these initiatives of using this sourcing intelligence just to have a better
sourcing
visibility.
intelligence, inclusion and diversity initiatives, and we're spending billions of dollars where like minority suppliers and things of that nature, improving the diversity. So there are a lot of efforts in that space as well. You got it.
Sounds great. Yeah, we should have a live event about that another day. So most of our participants today are supply chain professionals, and they may be looking to involve themselves in the digital transformation of their own supply chains. So this may seem as a daunting task for many companies that are starting or have not even started this journey. So what advice can you give them? Where should they start, or how should they start thinking about it?
Absolutely. I think some people, like in my initial career, I was very fascinated by technology. Like, oh, this robot, it's beautiful, it works, it picks up things in places. So I was more focused on how can I make this technology to work. I think the thinking should always be, what is the problem that needs a solution? The solution need not have to be, high tech. It needs to solve the problem. But if the problem is repeating, and if you're solving it, like on a regular basis, then you need to think about, is there a better incremental approach to it? And then, like once you have the credibility and ability to solve this kind of things, and things are going well, then you need to start thinking about, can I do something disruptive? Because the solutions that we have incrementally will give you value, but something that is disruptive would take you way forward. I'm talking about some of the technologies that have transformed, for example, the way, like we watch videos, streaming videos, never thought of it. We talked about some of the, like the map to digital transformation. Those are, to me, like big disruptive technologies. In supply chain, you may be thinking about what are the different things we could do. Incrementally, I'm adding value and developing credibility. And then, long term, I'm looking at disruptive technology that built on my credibility, I can go make it happen. And I also understand that this is something that I cannot go from 0 to 1. That means I got to make sure that I have the right, like adaptive, like a mentality folks working with me. I have models that shows what it can happen. Like, for example, if I have to go make some big changes on a $50-100 million kind of tool, I could, well, some of the things I could do is work with suppliers, do design of experiment, develop some of those things, actually run the physical product. Or imagine if you have an asset twin that actually mimics your physical model, and people trust what you're doing, that, what, if you change this particular location of the particular thermal processor, you could reduce the time by 10%, for example. That if you were to model it in an asset twin and show that that is how it is going to happen without impacting quality, then you can actually disruptively go from what would have taken physically months to maybe, like days to weeks. So those are the ways you make sure that you understand where the big problems are, prioritize the problem, get the buy-in from not just the leaders, but also from your community, because like adapting and leading and people willing to try it out, your peers are also is critical. and then experiment and and then go from there is how I would look at it.
Awesome. Thank you, Manny. I couldn't put it in better words than you, so I'll leave it there. And I think we can go to our audience's questions now. Right, Laura?
Yeah, we should run our last poll maybe before we go to the Q&A, so we'll let it pre-populate while we speak. So our last poll, it's about what you've learned from today's event. We would really like to know if we'll fulfill your expectations or if you're going home with something else that you expected. And then meanwhile, let's go to the Q&A. I don't know if if you have one already.
I can start. So, so we have one question about, of course, shortage of semiconductors because it's been in the news for so long. So it's a very well-known topic that COVID-19 impacted. So could you elaborate how Intel used digital elements or digital tools, I guess, specifically planning visibility and autonomous inventory management in mitigating these impacts? So I guess expanding a little bit more on what you already shared.
I think making data visible, real time is something of high value for us because things are changing on the fly. And how do we act on it? What are the different things we can do? That is where having the power of data, digitization, and analytics is helpful. And then understanding and playing out different scenarios, the inventory positioning. Do we want to push? Do we want to pull? Those are some of the things we are leveraging. And also having a war room of sorts, and then having the right people come in and look at this data, look at it from overall what's the impact of the customer and suppliers and our factory and employees in a wholesome fashion is where the data analytics came together. What actions we can take is something that we were able to leverage. And then what are the mitigations that we can do and how do we communicate it, and things of that nature were very helpful and useful tools, whether it is an optimization, whether it is the prediction models, whether it is a control tower with like data visualization, leveraging them, or sourcing intelligence that would come in and tell us this is what happened here, this is what we need to do. Things of that nature we're all putting together. And then of course, from a logistics perspective, what are the like we hear about the ports and situations, like our products getting stagnated, the supplier not able to ship. How are the things? What is the contract? How, like, do we have the right things in place? All those things need to be looked at in combination to look at how do we ensure uninterrupted delivery.
Thank you, Manny. So just going back to the poll and sharing some of our audience comments. So expanding my knowledge on digital transformation is the most interesting part of today's event, and also understanding the impact of digitalization in supply chain functions. Of course, getting ideas about improving supply chains, learning about automation and autonomous systems and the difference. So thank you for bringing all that to our audience. I would like to add one question. So
I think, sorry, Laura, just mentioning that people just selected almost all the options in this poll. So that means that Manny covered almost all the expectations from everyone. So that's great. I think it was a very complete discussion and the presentation. Go ahead, Laura.
Totally. So thank you, Manny, for that. So some of our audience is asking about, we know digitalization, and you also mentioned a lot of possibilities on how to apply digital transformation or the different tools that there exist. And they say, well, we can apply it to almost every aspect of a supply chain. We want to know where is Intel prioritizing that implementation. Do you have any comment on that?
That's a great question. Primarily, like our priority starts with the customer obsession, meaning what are the critical aspects the customer want. So understanding customer needs or changes in priorities, and how do we go from there, from a product to planning to capacity management is where we start with. So we have SNOP or SNOE processes that we are prioritizing heavily, and we are leveraging the power of data analytics and modeling in that space. And then from that point onwards, we're also looking at what it means to expand our capacity. That's where the IDM 2.0 comes in. Our customers not only are asking for just the Intel CPU product, the server products, they're also asking for expanding the product horizon. That's where we are moving into the external manufacturing, as well as how do we support, to Inma's earlier question, semiconductor, like being shortage and everything. What are the different areas we can help the industry, our customers, as well as our government through the foundries is another area we are prioritizing. And as you can imagine, there's a lot of planning that is going to happen. And there's a lot of focus around construction. We're going to be spending like $20+ billion this year just in US, and then we have expansion plans there. So the supply chain is very central to how we do that expansion. How do we support? What are the S&OPs? So those are the critical areas we're looking at right now.
Another question from Lynn Bryan said, "Hi, Manny, I noticed that you mentioned several times the culture change needed when transforming to the next level of supply chains. So what exact culture change are you referring to?"
There are a couple, but one thing that comes to my mind right now is ability to let go. Is, like you should not think that I control things in supply chain. And if you were to think that I am part of the supply chain and I can play a role, significant role in controlling, would like to leverage everything, around me to make our supply chain better. That to me is a big change. Like if you were sitting on a data, if you are managing a particular function, and if somebody were to come and say that a technology can make that happen for you. For example, if someone, a commodity manager is pulling a supplier risk data, and I have a ecosystem sensing tool that actually does the web scraping and comes and provides similar plus enhanced information. If the commodity manager is not willing to adopt that, then that's going to be a stumbling block. So to me, like willing to let go and willing to embrace the, like technology and the solution around you to enhance the supply chain would be a big cultural change.
Willing to let go for operations people is is a tough one. So I love that. Yeah, it's trusting more like technology and what it can bring just to contribute to moving the supply chain forward. Great advice. Thanks, Manny.
Thank you, Manny. So we have time for a couple more questions maybe. So Remy is asking about how's the criteria, how to select the criteria to measure the level of automation that you have on a supply chain, if that exists, and how would you evaluate your progress on the implementation of automation?
Great question again, because there are always competing priorities. There are always, multiple more projects than you can handle. So it comes down to, like for us, we really look at what are the critical challenges, Intel supply chain has. We have what's called as the strategic initiatives. We have, primarily we have targets in terms of customer, product, like a capacity, supply chain. We have the metrics, right? Looking at agility improvement, looking at cost improvement, looking at, so those targets, we look at how do we go about doing that. And then in supply chain, what are the things we can support? And what are the, like big challenges that are pain points for us? So that's our starting point. And then we look at strategically, what are the targets that we want to go accomplish? It not necessarily have to be pain points, but some of the technology changes that, okay, now I need to bring digitization in the S&OP process. But the question is, it is not the technology for the sake of technology. It is, what solution am I solving? What metrics is it going to move? And is that movement going to be significant enough that I can actually get a buy-in from, the decision makers? So that is, we have a chartering document. We have, like a management review committees. And we kind of want to go fast, but we also want to go make sure that we have the right areas where we want to go fast. So we use that kind of a governance model to leverage and like fund the various projects. And then we have good program management tools to monitor, and then milestones And then we actually, once we develop and implement, we also monitor the progress and the value or the impact. And before we start another project, if it is connected, we look at what did the value from there brought in. And we also have center of excellences where we leverage the resources as well as the learning to look at, did we deliver what we delivered? And in fact, we also do something like, okay, imagine that I'm funding you today, 6 months from now, whatever the timeline is. How do you see changes happening? What are the metrics that are going to move? And then we go back after 6 months and see, this is what we said is going to happen. This is where we are. It's not that always we hit the target like the way we said, because our eyes are sometimes bigger than our appetite, right? So, but we at least want to make sure that what the variances are and how we can adjust and move forward.
Awesome. Thank you, Manny. I truly believe that's a great advice and a recommendation for our audience. And the fact that we understand where we are before we know where we are going to go, and also how to connect what we do to the impact it will make. I think it's a great advice. So thank you for that.
I think we can answer one more question before we wrap up. So Carmel Chua just says, hi Manny, thank you for sharing your insights. May I know at which point an area human intervention required in an autonomous supply chain? This is a discussion that is ongoing, right? Like where this all human machine interaction, when is the human input needed in a increasingly autonomous system? I don't know, where are your ideas on that?
I think if the question is trying to ask, are we going to reach a singularity point? My perspective is probably we're not at least in the, like in some areas, like for example, managing inventory, like if you have thousands of SKUs, hundreds of thousands of SKUs, and would you be looking at reorder point and safety stock for all those components and SKUs? Probably not. Then you're going to have prioritization, and then others, you're going to have some kind of a model and a math that says, when you hit 80%, I mean, I'm just giving an example, right? Trigger in a reorder point, for example. So those kind of things that are not necessarily, at the same time, if you're buying a $100 million tool, you're not going to let automation, an autonomous system takes over. You will have some kind of it becomes more like a decision support. It is not decision making kind of a tool. So that means you really need to understand what your supply chain wants, what your priorities are, and where you need to make sure that the human like decision is required, and where you don't have to. So that it kind of comes down to the metrics that they're going to drive by, and also the governance model you're going to put together. But short answer is, I don't see a complete autonomous supply chain happening in the near future.
Thank you, man. Yeah, that would be a tough one. It would be nice to have like more autonomous parts of the supply chain for certain products, SKUs, as you mentioned. But yeah, it's gonna take time. Still, it's a very interesting debate, right? Where the human input is gonna be required, even when you have like AI expanding its influence in our decision making.
Yeah, they're making our life a lot more easier, because when you look at it, the complexity is expanding, and the data and the decision making, like data is exploding, like basically it is going at an exponential growth, and the decisions need to be made now, not later. So at some point, it becomes harder when you have to decide on thousands and tens of thousands of variables to come up with the right answer. It becomes beyond human comprehension. So that's where like leveraging data analytics and the power of AI will come into big play, and it is happening already.
Yeah, great. So thank you so much, Manny. I think this is a great like last discussion just to wrap up the event. We really enjoyed your presentation, your insights around supply chain digitalization. This is such a hot topic right now, and such a complex area to go into. I'm sure our audience has appreciated your insights and your suggestions and your advice on how to think about it. And hopefully we'll see many more companies starting this journey and maybe being inspired by what Intel has been doing in this past decade. So thank you so much, Manny, for being our guest once again in the MicroMasters. We really enjoy our discussions with you every time you join our live events. And hopefully we'll see you again in the future.
Great. Thank you, Inma and Laura, for the opportunity. And hopefully the audience enjoyed it as well. Thank you.